Welcome along to our bestofbets.com look ahead to the greatest steeplechase in the world. It is, of course, the Grand National taking place this coming Saturday at Aintree Racecourse. I'm delighted to be joined by both Lizzie Kelly and Richard Pitman, who have themselves participated in said race. I've been a mere watcher from the sides, the stands and all of that, but I've loved the race ever since I can first remember it as a child. And let's first of all bring you both in. Lizzie, first up with you. You know, why the Grand National? What is it that's so great about that race?
I think it's a real spectacle, isn't it? I think watching that amount of nut runners, because normally, you wouldn't get field sizes that the Grand National has, taking on unconventional fences is always going to be really exciting. And I suppose the other element to it is that some horses are just brought alive by them as well. So you kind of factor that in when you're like looking at horses that perhaps don't perform throughout the year, but they're just waiting for their Grand National opportunity because, they enjoy it so much. And it's a great place as well, Aintree. I mean, Liverpool comes alive through that meeting, and it brings a real excitement, I think, to the entire meeting. It's not, it's almost like a festival, really. It's not your absolute die-hard racing fans that are the only people there. There are so many people that just go for the atmosphere, and it does create a phenomenal event.
Is it a race then that when you thought about wanting to be a jockey as you were growing up, was that the race that you really, above all else, wanted to have a ride in?
Yeah, definitely. Absolutely. I mean, I really, really liked the Grand National from a really young age. And it was potentially one of the things that really got me interested in becoming a jockey, was watching that and thinking, could I give that a bash? And I always love watching it. I always think that it's a fantastic race to watch. And so much happens. It's a lot different now to how it was when I was growing up. And of course, since Richard was actually riding in it, it's changed a huge amount. But, I think it still offers a huge interest every year.
You are, by the way, hearing the sound of Hugo, who is alongside Lizzie to help us out with our podcast today. He's probably got more chance of tipping the winner on Saturday than any of us three. Richard, your own, Grand National enthusiasm. When did that sort of start in your boyhood?
It didn't start in my boyhood, but I joined Fred Winter when I was the first lad in his yard when he started, and he'd won 2 as a jockey, and he won on his first 2 seasons as a trainer with J. Trump, with his jockey from America, complete with Stetson and Tasley things. It was a revelation in Lambourne to see this dude walking down the street. So J. Trump won in '65, and then the next year Anglo won with Tim Norman on board. In fact, I've got a hat there for an Anglo. That was an Anglo hat. Got loads of these hats. A lovely, good-looking horse. And so there I was fired up, but I hadn't ridden any winners by then, so I wasn't going to get ride on Anglo. And Tim Norman got it as a spare when I think Jeff King hurt himself. And as Lizzie knows, this is what jump racing is about. You can get huge winners from someone else's adversity. You don't wish it on them, but that's what happens. But Jonathan, also, I had 2 seconds as a rider in the National, but then having joined the BBC and had 37 years, well, no, we didn't do them all 37. We stopped 10 years ago, didn't we? But for much of my broadcasting life, witnessing the fairy tales and the travesties. I mean, what about the bomb scare, or even bomb scare? Yeah, the time when it was a void because the jocks pretended they hadn't seen the recall man. The excitement, it just grabs you.
It sure does. Lizzie, obviously riding in the race for you. I mean, what do you recount about your experiences of the build-up and obviously the day and then, the ride on T for 2 himself?
Yeah, I think for me, I'd sort of had quite a lot of excitement. You know, I'd had a lot of time riding Tifa 2, and a lot of fun riding Tifa 2. And actually, if anyone could have gone to their first Grand National ride, you know, you couldn't have picked a better opportunity really to ride a horse that you know so well, but also who jumped so well as well. Yeah, it was great. I mean, we walked the course in the morning. I'd actually ridden over those fences before they did all the changes to them in the Fox Hunters when I was sort of 18. So I walked the course and they were very different. You know, they were much smaller than they were when I'd ridden over them before. So that was a bit of a relief. And then, I just got down to the start. I knew I wanted to sit sort of further back really than a lot of other people wanted. So I was able to stay out of the scrum of the start, which is always quite nice when you sort of think, oh, I'm not so pleased I'm not having to get involved in the front row here. And to be honest with you, he was sort of at the end of his career, and it was pretty much a box ticking exercise really, to say that I had ridden in the race. But yeah, it was great fun. And the one thing that I did think was, you know, Tifa 2 had a lot of class. He never struggled to travel in top quality races. But we came past the stands after having done the first circuit, and I thought, right, I'll sort of start trying to get into it now. And it was like the race sort of developed in the blink of an eye. They were gone, and I thought that was really interesting. So that was something that I suppose, having ridden in it once, you can't, you know, you don't know the ins and outs of it. But I would say that the race develops very, very quickly before you've even really realised.
Because you, the first female to ride a Grade 1 winner on the same horse, Tifa 2, a couple of Grade 1s on him, so a class performer. Didn't quite make it all the way around that day. Any regrets in that respect?
No, definitely not. I mean, for me, that entire day was about having a good time and him coming home in one piece. And we absolutely walked through one after the canal turn on our way back to the winning line, as it were. And I was sort of just beginning to get tailed off before the last, and I thought, right, enough's enough. You know, he was sort of like my mate really, Tifa 2. So once it was over, it was over. You know, there's no point carrying on really once the race is gone.
Yeah, and talking to mates, Richard, you had a couple of pretty good mates in Steelbridge and Chris.
Yeah, but my first ride was in Foynehaven's year, 1967, and I fell at the third. And it is an awful thing to be out of the race so early on. You know, I sat on the ground thumping it, and you just want to stop it and start again. Look, give me another chance. You know, I want to be in it. Well, who could foresee what was going to happen with Foynehaven when, of course, the smallest fence after Beecher's Brook, the biggest fence, biggest drop, and it was Popham Down, a loose horse with blinkers on that ran across the Foynehaven fence and stopped 3, who stopped 8, who stopped 12, who stopped 28. I mean, it's such a part of a history, isn't it? But John Buckingham, the late John Buckingham, did insist he was still going well enough to win. Well, he was tailed off at the time, you know. But that is the magic of Aintree. You don't know what's going to happen. In 1975, Andy Turnell, who, as you know, his funeral was last week, used to ride as short as Lester Piggott does on the flat, or did. He rode like that in the National. His balance was fantastic. But at Beecher's Brook, Lizzie knows, in those days, the drop was big, and most horses' noses hit the floor or nearly. And you've got to use your body as ballast to keep their backside down, because once their tail comes past your eyes, you've had it. You're not getting back from that one. And Andy slipped his reins, you see, beautiful style going in, then slipped his reins as he was landing and missed the buckle end of the reins. So he's double somersaulted off the back of his horse. And what you do, self-preservation, he grabbed Paul Kellaway, who was just landing nicely on Verona, thinking, well, that was okay, you know, fine. And there's these two tough jump jockeys sitting in the grass holding hands, you know, and the language was pretty strong from Kellaway, I can assure you. So you just never know what's going to happen. And what about, sorry, I'll get back to my rides in a minute, but what about the time McCoy trying so badly for so long to ride a winner, Clan Royal in front, second Beeches, two loose horses, run him into the wing, game over. Anyway, going back to my first one, Steel Bridge, it was the owner's first horse, and he gambled it because he thought it was an easy thing, from something like 300 to 1 down to 33s or 20s, I don't know, because he thought it would win, you see. Anyway, he'd run in 4 previous races, got round slowly, but, you know, never a threat. And this particular year, he finished second to Highland Wedding. Rondetta was third. And I don't know why he improved, but he was going for one of the first lady trainers, Barbara Lockhart Smith, who trained pretty moderate horses, but trained them well. And Fred Winter, my boss, always insisted I rode to his orders, not to the other people I rode for. My men go up the inner with the leaders. That's where brave men go. And so I'm riding Steel Bridge, and I looked across, and there were 2 Americans there. They were brothers. One was grabbing the horse by the ears, thinking it was a 5 furlong race. And the other one was sitting at the back of the reins as if he was having a smoke. And I thought, well, this isn't the place for me to be at this situation, but that's where we went. Anyway, Steel Bridge finished second. He ran the race of his life. He wasn't a very good horse, but it was my proudest moment, actually, Jonathan, because I went right round the inside where the brave men went, scraping paint off the rails. Loved it. The horse loved it. So exciting. And Chris, well, we've talked about him so often, haven't we? Great, big, strong, 17-2, hard pulling, great horse. He'd won the champion 2-mile chase by 20 lengths. To be running in a 4.5-mile race, Lizzie would tell you, anyone with any sense would say, 12 stone top weight, hold him up at the back. No, we went through the race. He was such an exuberant jumper that he would not have got round because he'd have landed on top of something else. As Lizzie was saying, 40 runners, you know, you don't see the first couple of fences unless you're up the front. And he was so different to many others. He would see a fence and quicken of his own volition. You didn't have to see a stride. He saw his own stride, and he'd be up in the air, jump low, but safe, but he would be galloping before he hit the ground. So this is why he went so far clear. He was never running away with me. I knew exactly what we were doing, but it was the quickness in, over, and away from his jumps. And quite unusually, going to the second circuit, you start playing jockeys then, you know, you've survived, you start playing jockeys. I could hear nothing because there were no horses around me. Normally, it's a very noisy thing. People talking, horses, as they exhale, hitting a fence, you know, very noisy. And going down on the second circuit, there were holes in the fences where a few accidents the first time round. There were jockeys standing by the rails, no horse, jockeys. One was just holding a bridle. I don't know where his horse had gone, just holding a bridle. So it was quite an unusual experience. When I was going to Beecher's Brook, in those days, there was a public address all the way around. And Michael O'Hare, the late Michael O'Hare, very great commentator, I can hear him now. He's saying, and Crispus 25 lengths clear, Red Rum's coming out of the pack and Fletcher's kicking him on. I thought, that'll do me. Keep hold, keep hold, keep hold. Between Beecher's, which he jumped like a hurdle, and the next, the Foynaven, David Nicholson was sitting on Barsnet, I think it was, and David was called the Duke because he was a bit better than the rest of us, you know, educated and smart and one thing or another. And he was sitting like an Indian in those old John Wayne films at the top of the hill watching the others kill each other. And he sat there, the horse was grazing, the arms folded, and he said, Actually, Richard, you're 33 and a half lengths clear. Kick on and you'll win. Well, kick on was not what I was going to do, Jonathan. Stamina was always the key. You know, a lot of people, Lizzie, will agree, I'm sure. A lot of people think jockeys are totally brainless. No, we do think things out. You know, we actually plan things. And so to be in solitude for so long and still crossing the Anchor Bridge Road, I couldn't hear another horse. And then his stamina dropped out like a car running out of petrol. His legs that used to good moving horse started going sideways, and he had half-cocked ears, and they went. Well, when you haven't got strength to keep your ears up, Jonathan, you are at the bottom of the barrel. But I could then start hearing a horse come. It was fast ground, so you could hear the drum, 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 drum. And also, Red Rum was a high blower. As he exhaled, his nostrils flapped. So you could hear. So I've got drum, drum, getting louder and louder. You know, when you're kids, you have dreams of running away from the bogeyman and you're in treacle and you can't get away. It was horrible. And he jumped the last, okay, still well clear, but he'd gone. But I made a boyish error. I thought I'd got to wake him up now before the elbow. And I took my hand off the rein to give him a whack, but in the wrong hand. And I am a big anti-whip person because of my own mistake all those years ago. It wasn't so much that I hit him. By taking my hands off a 17-2 horse who was knackered, it's let go of his head a bit, and he's gone, and he's gone left-handed when I wanted to go right. It was a boyish, stupid error. And I still believe to this day, you know, he was beaten half a length, and I lost, I think, 2 lengths in trying to straighten him up and get back on. So great feeling, ride of my life. Money couldn't buy it. It will remain with me till I die. I get a lot of stick from people. I don't care. I rode to my trainer's orders. We had a good run. So there was elation for a while and then desolation. But within a minute, I was elated again because I'd had a ride that you just couldn't get those experiences. And I'm a big fan of Red Rum, naturally.
I think we probably all are. I remember those. In fact, that was the first race that I can recall as a child. And I think you'd be hard pressed to argue that that's not the greatest Grand National of all time, given what Red Rum went on to achieve and the fact that Lescargo, who'd won 2 Gold Cups already and was about to win a national himself a couple of years later, was back in 3rd place. Lizzie, if we can bring you back in again, out of those that you know on paper that are likely to run this week, I mean, if the phone was going to go during the next couple of minutes, and it was a trainer saying, "Can we get you back out of retirement? I'm offering you this to sit on Saturday." What would your idea of one of those that you'd like to ride be in this year's race?
Oh, it's so difficult, isn't it? Because for all the reasons that we've already stated, you know, how it's so difficult to even kind of get a clear run, and there are hard luck stories and so on. I mean, right now I'd probably go for Delta Work. Obviously the performance at Cheltenham was absolutely brilliant. He's got class, a lot of class, and a horse that I think is probably ready for this in his stage of his career. He took really well to the cross country jumps, which is a good sign as well, and because obviously they're unconventional. So you would sort of be thinking, right, you know, I ticked that off the box, really. You know, I know that he's able to jump unconventional fences. So yeah, I'll probably go for Delta Work. Okay,
Delta Work sounds like a good ride to me, but then again, to me, anything would be a pretty good ride just to sit on one and approach the first even. I might be jumping off though before I actually got there. Not as brave maybe as you two. Richard, have you had a chance to have any thoughts, just longer term thoughts on this year's race without getting too specific before we know the actual declarations?
Yeah, I've been through it a lot. This is, in my opinion, the most open Grand National in years. I mean, when I was riding, if you were rated 110, you'd get in the race. Horses that were rated at 8 stone 9, they had to carry 10 stone, but they were running in it. Now you've got to be rated 140 to get in. So it is so open. Just touch on one point, because I've got quite a few things on the race. With Lizzie saying she pulled up, this was one of my proudest moments when Rose Patterson, the late Rose Patterson, took over. She asked me for old man's opinions on race, and I said yes. Instead of the steward saying to everyone before they go out, "No, boys and girls, 4.5 miles, 30 fences, go steady," no one's going to take any notice at all. I said, you've got to impress on the jockeys. This is not for your ego. If your horse is tired, pull up. And 15 pulled up last year. And I've seen jockeys, and I won't name one, but a top jockey who rode into the last fence at a trot because the horse was absolutely tired. It fell in a heap. It was winded. Remember, the world watches this race. It's live to so many people, 600 million. And so a lot of people stopped to say, oh, is he all right? Is he all right? They got him up, and 2 people behind his quarters, as if you were loading a horse into the starting stalls, hoiked him up the running in front of all these people, and the horse was actually out on his feet. And that is so important. If it's to survive, and they've done so much to increase its longevity, jockeys have got to be aware that this isn't just to get your completion record back up, So anyway, Lizzie pulled up, well done. And the message has gone in. You're right, of course, about Delta, a lovely horse of Gordon Elliott's. But what about the hard race he had at Cheltenham? How much effect will that have had on him? I mean, you look down through this, Jonathan, there are so many horses that have been given an easy run the last time, not run twice since Christmas, ran over hurdles to preserve its weight range. You can't go up, of course, after the weights are out. All these sort of things. There are so many imponderables. I love it. But Ted Walsh, he was second last year, wasn't he? And he's second now, third rather. Was he third? Yeah, second or third. Really good horse, this. Ted Walsh has only had 3 winners this season, but any second now is in great form. It has to be in the mix. Manila Times, last year's winner, hasn't performed from a couple of runs this time. Burrows Saint didn't get the trip. Mullins said he's stronger this year. He was 4th. There are so many imponderables. What about Cloth Cap? Was favourite last year, but he had a breathing problem, which we didn't know about. Well, he's come back quietly under the radar this time. But if they put that right, and he lives in outside stables, by the way, not in the conventional stables, so he can be in and out at his own wish, fresh air. So have we forgotten about Cloth Cap? But there's a lot more I'm sure we'll talk about as we go, because the Irish have the nap hand, but there's some brilliant stories about English horses. What about the grey mare, Snow Leopardess? She's won her only 3 this year. She's won over the big fences. She's had a foal. And more than that, they've taken 2 embryos out of her, and they're in surrogate mothers to 3-day eventing stallions. Mm-hmm. I mean, what if a mare could win the Grand National first time in 71 years, and then her foals or offspring later go and win an Olympic gold medal in 3-day eventing? The stories are just so good.
Yep, and of course, no mare has won it since Nickel Coin in 51, and I think even I'd have to say at this stage, 2 of us in this 3-person podcast were not born at that point, Richard. I'm wondering which one of the trio was. I think we've taken it quite a long way here, and I love the stuff that we've been talking about. And I think probably just to wind up, on the 41st anniversary of one of the greatest Grand National stories, the Alden Neaty and Bob Champion win of 1981. That's the day on which we're recording this. I mean, if you could pick one, that might be difficult, but if you could pick one favourite Grand National story, the pair of you, Lizzie, which one would yours be?
Oh, I mean, it's probably a little bit cliche, but actually, Rachel Blackmore winning on Manila Times last year was as exciting, I think, for a female jockey as it could get. and for all the obvious reasons. You know, it's a race that, even if you are a champion jockey, can take you years and years and years to win, like we saw with Tony McCoy, of course. And it doesn't, because it's such a lottery. And I think that the question of a female jockey for me was never that there weren't any good enough, because there certainly have been and there certainly are. But when you add the lottery aspect to it, and you have, you know, maybe 2 female jockeys riding in the race, and that lottery aspect, you know, it was probably going to take quite a long time, perhaps, for a female jockey to win it. And therefore, we were going to have this very tiring, mundane question of who was going to be the first female jockey to ride a Grand National winner for years and years. That was my fear, even though, you know, people like Rachel Blackmore were winning the best jockey at, you know, at Cheltenham Festival type jockey. You know, she's absolutely fantastic. And so I think that it was obviously my elation for her, having, you know, ridden against her for a long time, but also the relief, I suppose, that question was finally answered and it was finally put to bed and we could kind of all just get on with it. You know, I hope that we aren't now going to kind of have the next, who's going to be the next female jockey, because that would slightly, for me, sort of make Rachel's achievement a bit pointless if you then just, you know, reword the same question. But I think as her friend and as, you know, a female jockey myself, I thought that was just exceptionally exciting. And I think that, you know, there'll be plenty of people who've you know, had the same sort of life as me who will agree with that.
You're absolutely right. It was nothing short of a monumental day for the sport and for women's sport in general, you know, worldwide. It's, you know, the great, everybody focuses on that race from wherever you are in the world. They carry television pictures. She did an amazing job, as did you, by taking part. You know, I was listing the female jockeys who'd taken part in the race, only 19. Now, I know you mentioned in the press during your riding career about lack of opportunities for female riders. Only 19 of them. Some obviously have ridden on multiple occasions, like Rachel herself, but only 19 female jockeys in the history of the race since Charlotte Brew first did it back in Redrum's third year in '77. That just goes to show that actually on the percentages, women are miles better than the fellas because they've had one winner from 19 attempts.
Yeah, I mean, you know, lots of jockeys are absolutely desperate to ride in the Grand National because it is one of those races that actually, when you go to the pub and you say, "Oh, I'm a jockey," the first question you're going to get asked is, "Oh, have you ridden in the Grand National?" Mm-hmm. And that comes before champion hurdles and gold cups and, you know, derbies or whatever. And so, you know, it's very difficult, and a lot of jockeys, you kind of build up a relationship with the horse throughout the season, and then, you know, you retain the ride for that race. You know, it's not particularly a race where you'll find yourself a spare ride, and if you do, then it's probably not very nice. So yeah, I think it was just it was an amazing occasion, and of course I was working for Talk Sport and I was there, which made it even more special for me.
Yeah, brilliant. And talking of women in Grand National history, Richard, Jenny, 1983.
Corbière, and then again Royal Athlete, and then the race that was void, Echenesse won. You know, amazing. But she had a lot of runners in the National. She liked staying chasers. I just want to go back to a female winning the National, and wasn't it a great interview afterwards as she pulled up, and Rachel was very much one to say, "I'm not female, you know, I'm a jockey." And this hot and sweaty interview, you know, Mike shoved up your nose. She said, "Oh, Jez, I'm not sure if I'm a female, a male, or if I'm even human." You know, that is the sort of emotion that the National brings. But you can't go without the horse. You have to have the horse, but then you've got to be up to it. I always said for ages, I've been saying a female would win the National before the Gold Cup. Well, I only just scraped in. Rachel last year, National, Rachel this year, Gold Cup. And the reason being, Fiddler's Pike, ridden by Rosemary Henderson, age 51, was 5th. And that told you all you needed to know. A horse person over those fences, given the right horse, would go up. And then Katie Walsh took it on with Seabass being 3rd. You know, it was waiting to happen, and we all rejoiced in it. Just go back to Charlotte Brew. She rode a right old monkey, didn't she? Who refused at the 4th last, the open ditch. And I was doing stunts for the BBC then. I'd retired, but I was still riding, you see, and we did loads of them around with cameras and all sorts of things. And I did one riding, God, what was the horse called she rode? Does anyone remember?
Barony Fort.
That's the one. I borrowed him because the Beeb wouldn't pay any money to hire one. And I'd forgotten him refusing the year before. And I was riding with Mark Phillips, you see. So we're both mic'd up, camera car on the inside. And the year before, I'd ridden around with John Oaksey, and he said at the start, "Oh, Pitman, we won't jump the 3rd." I said, "Of course we will, John. The camera's car's beside us." He said, "No, it's a big open ditch, only 2 of us, cold blood. No, it'd be awful, bloodbath." So I said, "Well, how do we get round it?" "Well, we gallop down to it. We pull them up just before the ditch, you see, and we take them round to the other side and back them up to the fence and give them a kick in the belly." And they said, "No one will ever notice because, you know, in the cutting room, they'll be brilliant, sew it together." No one. So I said this to Mark Phillips. He was running the Queen's 3-day event at Columbus, so that was going to love it around there. He said, "Well, I'm going to jump it." You windy jump. I said, "What's the matter with you? I'm jumping it." So anyway, when Barony Fort saw the open ditch, he's going, "Oh, oh, oh, oh." And I've slapped him and kicked him. And he was like a big fairy, you know, he fluttered onto the face. His body weight took him on. And I was winded, lying on the floor. When you're winded, you can't breathe, you can't talk. You go, "Oh." And Oaksey, who was covering for the Daily Mail, came in and kicked me over, turned me over with his shoe, turned me over, you see. So I'm now lying up, stomach, "Oh." And he said, "Do you know, Pitman, you're a year older, but you're no wiser, are you?" So we had such great fun, but if they don't like it, they don't like it, you know, which is, some horses love it going back there, others don't.
We love going back there, obviously, ourselves, although I understand that you're not going to be there this year, Richard, but maybe that's for another day, because the clock on this particular meeting is winding down. And so bestofbets.com, myself, Jonathan Doidge, would like to thank you both very much indeed. Richard Pitman, a man who's very much an integral part of Grand National history, and Lizzie Kelly, the first lady to have ridden a Grade 1 winner over fences. It's been an absolute pleasure, and I hope to speak to you again before the National this Saturday.